I mean, it's so easy to forget about this game after everything at Old Trafford, but despite beating Aston Villa 2-1, Man City, of course, fell short on just goal difference, which is absolutely heartbreaking for me and the team. What did you make of City's performance against Villa, Rach? What were your thoughts on it, first off?
It was always going to be difficult to try and not think about the other game, right? So I think, they would have known from the crowd that Chelsea were 2-0 up early. And Sophie said you could kind of feel it. It just went flat. And I think you try to focus on what you can control, but when you know that the mountain is getting steeper and steeper as you play your game, it puts more pressure on you in the key moments when you're in front of goal. They had created 31 chances. I think they had something like 10 on target, right? That will be a huge frustration for them. But it kind of, for me, and I might get criticised for this, I feel like Manchester City's season can be summed up as kind of the season of leaving the door ajar. And I mean, you look at the stats, 18 wins, 1 draw, 3 losses, 4 red cards in 3 games, mad. 14-game unbeaten run, had the division's top goal scorer, had the most clean sheets. You're looking at that thinking, this is a title-winning team, right? But then you look at the games where they didn't lose it against Aston Villa. That wasn't necessarily where they lost the league. You look back at some of the games where you're like, for me, I never felt like they always shut the door on a team that they were dominating. They had some good games. They'd be going 4-0, 5-0, 7-0 against Spurs. But then there were games where you're like, they were just leaving the door ajar for the team potentially could get back into it. You look at, they beat Leicester 1-0, right? I was at that game. They were the dominant team. But as the game went on, Leicester almost scored, almost got back into it. Lost 2-1 to Arsenal at the death twice. Like, at the death. Even a draw in that game, either of those games, they'd have won the league. That loss to Brighton. 2-1 against Villa twice. Again, late goals. 2-1 against Everton. 1-0 beating Chelsea. Just, right? All over them in the first half. Second half, Chelsea threw the kitchen sink at them. And you're just like, if you're putting the games to bed, rather than kind of going, we're ahead by 1 goal, you're almost allowing teams to come back into it. And it's kind of come back to bite them at the worst possible time of the season, where they left the door ajar in the league and Chelsea came barreling through. And when you look back at those games and you think, had you got another goal, had it been a draw instead of, had that Arsenal City game where Stina scored twice in 3 minutes, had it just been a draw, different story. And they're the moments they're going to look back on thinking, could we have just done a fraction? It wasn't even a lot, a fraction more, 1% more. And it might have been a different story. I think the weekend it was composure in key moments, and it sounds shit now, but that will stand to them next season. I can only see them getting better, but it is a gut-wrenching way. I'd rather just lose 5 points off the top rather than on friggin' goal diff. I mean, you're the player, Chloe. Would that not be an easier pill to swallow?
I've got to agree, Rach, but I kind of think we've seen the same thing with Chelsea though, where they've had kind of games that they've just about scraped wins from. And I was thinking, okay, this is Man City's kind of season where they're just about going to scrape through until the end of the season. But you talked about the kind of near wins that they've made. But for me, I think the pivotal point in their season was the Arsenal game with Man City. They had the game, they had it. In the first half, they were so dominant, they looked so sure. That was the moment in which that would have been the additional 3 points that would have taken them. It would have won them the title, essentially. And to lose in that way, to come back from a 1-0 up to go 2-1 down, it just felt like, oh, actually, this is where Chelsea's fortunes changed. And I think, for Chelsea, that was a lucky moment. But for Man City, that was the moment in which they essentially lost the title. And I think every single goal that Chelsea scored meant that City needed to score even more. So six goals from Chelsea meant they had to score basically 10 goals at Villa Park.
I think as well you have to recognise losing Bunny Shaw at the time they lost her was just the worst possible time to lose her. To not have her, say, in the Bristol game, could they have scored more against Bristol? And Bristol did well in that first half. They went in 0-0 as far as I remember. But losing a player like that, you could kind of look at some of those opportunities they created where you need that composure, and she could have been the difference. And that's such a cruel blow to lose her when you did, just at the end of the season where you could really, where goals became such a key factor. To lose your key goal scorer, losing Jill Roord would have been massive, because it would have been, a way Gareth Taylor would have identified a way to play using her. I think Jess Park has been a revelation. But perhaps it's another area I think they need to look at in the summer is strength and depth, and it's depth and quality as well. So like knowing that if you lose a Bunny Shaw, you have a really good number 9 coming in. And I know that's hard because no one wants to be on the bench, right? But when you're Manchester City, you want to be winning leagues, you want to be going deep into competitions. That's what Chelsea have, is that strength in depth. And I think that's an area that they'll need to look at, is to just bring in a few more key players in those positions that should an injury like that happen, you've got a backup plan.
Do we feel like Man City actually got to the end of the season and they bottled it? And like, what lessons can they really learn from this season? Because for me, it feels like when it came to the back end of the season, the very business end of the season, they had literally set themselves up in this great position. They were fairly fresh. They weren't competing in all these other competitions. They didn't have Champions League football. Like, I felt like that was the time. They only had the WSL title to focus on. And at the end of the day, they had the players there. They had, like you said, Jess Park. They had, the WSL number 1 keeper there. They had, an array of players who were quite happy to go and score goals. I mean, it just felt like, and they also had someone like Steph Horton who was going to be retiring, to kind of like, that extra kind of emotional element to it. And at the end of it, they couldn't produce that result. I mean, for me, it feels like in a game like the Arsenal game, what you need to be doing when you're 1-0 up, it might not be the sexiest football to play, but you shore yourself up. You make sure that you do not concede more than anything else. I mean, if you're not getting goals, then don't concede any goals. And I feel like you need to keep your nerve in those kind of games. So yeah, for me, bottled it. Lessons for next year: recognise your key moments and learn when to just see out the game.
Yeah, I think they fumbled it yards from the end zone. Like, it was in their hands. That's going to be the frustrating thing. And I know that Chelsea had games in hand, but they had the moment to put it out of their reach. And that's what's the hardest thing to deal with, I guess, is knowing that you essentially fumbled it rather than they've come from behind and caught up with you. So that would be, yeah, like you said, key moments, composure in key moments, and depth, I think, would have massively stood to them had they not lost Bunny Shaw. Had they had he wouldn't have had to be rotating. Should I be putting Kelly there? Should Fowler go in? Fowler, I think, has had a really good season as well. I think it's worth shouting out to her.
And Hempo, another great season.
Yeah, Hemp, unreal. But like, she'd stepped in place of Chloe Kelly at times. She's come central. I think she's done well when she's had to come central. Scored 2 goals against Bristol. But I think at that level, when you're at touching distance of the title, you don't want to be going, which one should I put in the number 9 because our number 9's injured, right? You want to know this is the replacement in this situation that's going to get us over the line. So yeah, loads of lessons to be learned, and I think they've got Champions League, which is huge, and again, that's where that depth is going to be needed, because they're going to want to get into the group stages this time in the Champions League.
Well, you talked there. I mean, they're going to be resetting themselves over summer. They're going to be fighting on 4 fronts next season for like the first time in quite a number of years. I mean, we're talking a little bit about squad rotation and kind of having that depth there. And obviously, last season we only had Jill Ward come into the club for a record-breaking fee. But you kind of think, okay, well, can they risk another summer without any more big additions, or where do you think actually they're going to be kind of tightening up or looking to kind of recruit? What would you say was like number 1 on Gareth Taylor's shopping list for summer?
Another number 9.
Yeah.
A high quality number 9. And I think that's why the Viv Miedema rumours have been swirling. I think it's interesting. Will she want to be playing second fiddle to Bunny Shaw? I don't know, but I think...
How will she look in blue? In light blue?
She look absolutely fine. And I think she's versatile, which is huge for them, which I think could be really valuable. So say someone did get it, Jill Ward got injured, Viv could play the 10, so I think that versatility would be very useful for them as well. And I think as well you have to factor in Man City is an attractive prospect for players coming in. Not only are they challenging at the top of the table, they're a very, very well supported club. They've got unbelievable facilities. Now they're in Champions League. That's another string to their bow and another thing that will draw players in. So I think they'll have a lot of people interested in joining for sure.
Well, definitely a lot of people thinking about coming in, but within minutes of their final game, City announced that Ellie Roebuck, Demi Stokes and Ruby Mays and Angledal were all set to leave the club this summer. That was quite the offloading of information so soon after the end of season. Literally that. It was almost like what Arsenal did about we're gonna, the Emirates is our main stadium, but don't, forget that thing that we said about Viv leaving. Don't worry about that bit.
Don't look over there, look over here. I really hope they don't draw Real Madrid in the Champions League anywhere, or any Spanish team, to be honest, because for some reason that's their bogey team. I just want them to get into the group stages in the Champions League. my biggest hope for them. It could make things really interesting if 3 English teams are in the group stages, because we'd have to try and cover them all. But I want as many of them in there as possible. And I think City deserve to be in the Champions League. I think they deserve to win things. Whatever it might be next season, I want them to pick up a title, a trophy, something.
My biggest hope is that Paris FC don't knock out everybody in the group stages as they did last season. I do feel like they're the bogey team, like they're the team that everyone has like this kind of like PTSD type thing
Surprise,
about.
motherfuckers!
Yeah, literally that. Just could you not this year, please, Paris FC, because you've ruined a lot of people's hopes and dreams. Who's it going to be this year? Can you? Oh, don't. Let's not think about it. We've also got to touch on Villa. They obviously did well to withstand the pressure from City in the last game of the season, but unable to give Carla Ward, friend of the pod, the send-off she deserved. Her replacement's still yet to be announced. There's a lot of uncertainty for the club. I mean, do we have any thoughts, or have we heard any rumours about who we think she might be going for? Because I feel like it's been fairly quiet on that front. I haven't heard anything sort of, either in the rumour mill or behind the scenes. Like, it seems sort of like either they're keeping it very close to their chest and they're going to announce it as kind of like this big like resurgence of Aston Villa for next year, or actually they're just struggling to find someone.
I haven't heard a lot of managerial rumours, and there are a number of clubs looking. I'd really like to see Joe Montemurro back in the WSL.
Ooh,
and whether that's at Aston Villa or whether it's at Brighton or whether it's at Leicester, I really like Joe. So potentially, I'm starting a rumour here, but whether he'd end up at Aston Villa, I don't know. But he could. I'd like to see him back in the WSL. But I think who they bring in will kind of show their ambitions. I know it's something Carla Ward has spoken about is that need for investment in the squad, and whether Villa are wanting to grow and challenge as a team or whether they're just happy to sit mid-table. I think we'll see that based on who they bring in as a manager and what players they get in and what players they potentially lose or manage to keep.